Every year my family is hosting for Thanksgiving, and I'm forced to babysit. Their kids. I'm sick of IT. This year IT's going to be my turn. I've got to get this off my chest because it's been building up for years and I need to vent. I'm 16 now, and for as long as I can remember, Thanksgiving has been the worst day of the year for me. It's not because I don't like turkey or pie or whatever. No, that part is fine. The problem is every single year I get forced into being the unpaid, unappreciated babysitter for everyone's kids. When I say forced, I forced. I don't get asked, I don't get a choice, and I definitely don't get any thanks for it. It starts the same way every year. My family hosts Thanksgiving at our house because apparently we're the best equipped translation. We have the biggest living room and a backyard, so everyone dumps their responsibilities on us. Relatives start arriving around noon, all smiling and carrying their side dishes like it's some Hallmark movie moment. But for me, it's just the beginning of my descent into holiday hell. The second the guests arrive, it's like my existence shifts. I'm no longer a family member. I'm not a teenager who maybe wants to relax and enjoy the holiday. Nope, I become the babysitter. Without fail, someone, usually my Aunt Lisa, shows up with her screaming toddlers in tow, hands me a diaper bag and says something like, "You're so good with kids. Can you keep an eye on them for a bit while I help set up?" Spoiler alert, she doesn't help set up. She sits in the kitchen gossiping with my mom while I get stuck trying to stop her 3-year-old from sticking crayons in the electrical outlets. It's not just her kids either. By the time everyone's arrived, there's like 6 or 7 kids under the age of 10 running around, and guess who's responsible for making sure they don't burn the house down? Me, not their parents. Me. Because apparently the moment people walk through the door, they forget their parents and just assume I'm some kind of magical child wrangling machine. Here's the kicker. I don't even get to sit down and eat like at all. By the time the food is ready, everyone's settling in at the table. And I'm starving because I've spent the last 3 hours chasing after kids, cleaning up spills and breaking up fights over who gets the blue crayon. I think finally I can grab a plate of food and sit down. But nope. That's when someone, usually my mom, says, "Honey, why don't you take the kids to the den so the adults can enjoy dinner in peace?" Are you kidding me? I've been enjoying these kids for hours, but sure, let's make sure the adults can eat their turkey without interruption. I grab a plate, usually half filled with whatever is left, because no one thinks to save me anything. I get sent off to the den to supervise the kids while they eat. Do how hard it is to get a bunch of toddlers to eat Thanksgiving dinner. Half of them don't even want turkey. They just want rolls and mashed potatoes. The other half are screaming because they don't like gravy or someone else took the seat they wanted. By the time dinner is over, I'm covered in cranberry sauce, exhausted and still hungry because I've been too busy wiping sticky hands and cutting up food into tiny pieces to actually eat my own meal. And then as soon as the adults are done eating, they're all like, "Time to head home." They grab their kids, say their goodbyes and leave. That's it. No one says thank you to me for watching their kids. No one even seems to notice that I'm practically falling over from exhaustion. They just pack up their leftovers and head out, leaving me to help clean up the aftermath of the chaos their kids left behind. This year though, I'm done. I've had it. The frustration has been building up for years. Every single Thanksgiving the same script plays out, and I'm always the one stuck on the losing end of it. Not this year. Weeks ago I made a promise to myself: no more. No more getting pushed into babysitting like it's some sacred family tradition. No more sacrificing my entire day so the adults can have their little wine-fueled dinner party in peace, and definitely no more skipping my Thanksgiving dinner. The one day of the year with food that's actually worth looking forward to, just so I can cut up turkey into bite-sized pieces for kids who won't even eat it. This time I'm putting my foot down. I don't care if it starts a full-blown family war or if I have to barricade myself in my room with a chair wedged under the doorknob this year. Thanksgiving is going to be different. Thanksgiving Day rolls around, and the morning starts just like it always does. I wake up to the smell of turkey roasting in the oven and the sound of my mom clanging pots and pans around in the kitchen. She's already in her annual state of pre-holiday stress, barking orders at my dad about setting up extra chairs and muttering to herself about whether there's enough cranberry sauce. I'm sitting in my room just staring at the ceiling, trying to mentally prepare myself for the chaos that's about to unfold. I know exactly what's coming. By noon, the relatives will start showing up and the whole circus will kick off. This time I've got a plan. I'm bracing myself for battle, determined not to let anyone steamroll me into being the family doormat. Again. Right on schedule, the doorbell rings at 12:04 p.m. and the first wave of guests arrives. It's Aunt Lisa, the queen of dumping her responsibilities on everyone else. Her 2 kids are already a disaster, crying and screaming over something that happened in the car right over. One of them is holding one half-empty juice box that's already dripping sticky orange liquid onto our carpet. The other is dragging some ready stuffed animal by its ear, like it's a hostage. And Lisa doesn't even bother with pleasantries. She barely steps through the door before she spots me and zeroes in like a heat-seeking missile. "There," she says, with that fake, cheerful tone that makes my stomach churn. "I'm so glad you're here. Can you take the kids for a minute while I help your mom in the kitchen?" She doesn't even wait for me to answer. She shoves a bulging backpack into my hands, the usual survival kit of toys, snacks, and emergency diapers, and starts herding her kids in my direction like it's already a done deal. Normally, this is the part where I'd sigh, grit my teeth, and resign myself to my fate, but not this time. This time I'm ready. I take a deep breath, hand the backpack right back to her, and say as calmly as I can, "Actually, I'm not babysitting this year." The look on her face is priceless. It's like, I just told her, I'm planning to set the turkey on fire and serve everyone a plate of ashes. "What do you mean? You're not babysitting?" she demands, her voice dripping with disbelief. "You're so good with them." It's the same line she's used every year to guilt trip me, as if being good with kids is some kind of curse that obligates me to spend. Every holiday is the family nanny. I say, locking eyes with her, "It's Thanksgiving and I'd like to enjoy it too, like everyone else does." I can hear my heart pounding in my ears, but I keep my voice steady. My palms are sweaty from holding my ground, but I refuse to back down. And Lisa stares at me like I just insulted her entire family lineage, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For a moment, I think she's about to argue with me, but instead she just huffs loudly, yanks the backpack back into her arms, and stumps off toward the living room with her kids trailing behind her. I could tell my mom overheard because out of the corner of my eye, I saw her freeze niche chop while slicing carrots. Then came the look, that classic mom look, the one loaded with unspoken disapproval, like she was trying to drill a hole in the back of my head with her eyes. Her expression screamed, "Really? You're doing this now?" It was the kind of look that usually made me feel about 2 inches tall, but this time I refused to let it get to me. I just shrugged, muttered something about needing to grab my phone from my room, and made a tactical retreat upstairs. I knew exactly how this was going to play out. She'd still on it for a while, probably went to Aunt Lisa or one of the other relatives, and then drop it because Thanksgiving was stressful enough without starting a full-blown argument. In my room, I flopped down on my bed and took a deep breath. I could hear the muffled sounds of chatter and laughter downstairs, mixed with the occasional shriek from one of the kids. For once it wasn't my problem, and the relief was like a warm blanket. I scrolled through my phone for a while, half expecting someone to come knock on my door and demand that I come back down to help out, but no one did. Maybe they thought I'd cool off and change my mind. Maybe they were too busy socializing to care. Either way, I stayed upstairs longer than I needed to, just soaking up the rare feeling of not being the designated babysitter. When I finally came back down, it was just in time for dinner. The kitchen smelled amazing: turkey, stuffing, gravy, all the good stuff wafting through the air, and I was determined not to miss out this year. I made ab line for the dining room and made sure to grab a spot at the table before anyone could say otherwise. Not just any spot, either. I sat smack in the middle, right between my dad and one of my uncles, in full view of everyone. If someone was going to try to pull me away from dinner, they'd have to do it with the entire table watching. As soon as the food was served, I wasted no time piling my plate high. Turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, cranberry sauce, green beans, rolls. I took it all. My plate was so full, it was almost comical, but I didn't care. For once, I was going to enjoy this meal. I sat back, fork in hand, savoring the first bite of stuffing when it happened. Right? On cue, someone at the far end of the table piped up, "So who's watching the kids?" The question hung in the air like a grenade, and I could feel the tension ripple across the table. Normally this would be the moment where all eyes shifted to me, and I'd sheepishly get up and shuffle off to babysit. But not this time. I didn't even hesitate. Before anyone could say a word, I put my fork down, looked up, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm not babysitting this year. I've done it every Thanksgiving since I was like 10, and I'd like to actually enjoy dinner with everyone for once." The silence that followed was deafening, that moment in a movie when the record scratches and everything just stops. That's what it felt like. Forks froze halfway to mouths, glasses of wine hovered in mid-air. No one said anything for what felt like an eternity, though. It was probably only a few seconds. I didn't look up to see their reactions. I just kept eating, acting like nothing was out of the ordinary. But I could feel the stares, especially my mom's. Her glare was practically burning a hole into the side of my face, but I refused to acknowledge it. I'd said my piece and I wasn't backing down. Eventually, Aunt Lisa broke the silence with a dramatic sigh, the kind that made it sound like she'd just been asked to lift a 100-pound weight. "Fine," she said, pushing her chair back with a loud scrape. "I guess I'll keep an eye on them." She made a big show of getting up, muttering something under her breath that I couldn't quite make out, and marched off to the den to round up her kids. I didn't even flinch. I just kept eating, pretending I hadn't noticed her little performance. The stuffing was excellent, by the way, best I'd ever had. The table slowly returned to normal, though the energy felt a little off. People started talking again, passing dishes around and pouring more wine, But there was this weird undercurrent of tension. I could tell a few of the adults were still thrown off by what had just happened. My mom in particular looked like she was biting her tongue so hard it might fall off. She kept glancing at me like she was debating whether to say something, but I guess she decided against it because she stayed quiet. Meanwhile, I just kept eating, savoring every bite like it was the first real meal I'd ever had. The rest of the meal was awkward to say the least. No one outright said anything to me, but I could tell some of the adults were annoyed. Honestly, I didn't care. For the first time in years, I actually got to sit down and eat my Thanksgiving dinner without someone tugging on my sleeve or screaming in my ear. It was amazing. After dinner, when everyone was getting ready to leave, and Lisa made a passive-aggressive comment about how some people don't know how to help out. But I just smiled and said Happy Thanksgiving. I know I probably pissed some people off, but you know what, I don't care. I'm done being the family babysitter. If they want someone to watch their kids, they can hire a professional. I'm 16. I deserve to enjoy Thanksgiving too. Update. The next morning started off peaceful enough. I woke up later than usual, still riding the wave of triumph from the night before. For the first time in years, I stood my ground and actually enjoyed Thanksgiving like a normal person. I ate my dinner without interruptions, stayed out of the chaos of babysitting, and honestly, I felt pretty proud of myself. I thought maybe the whole thing had blown over. Sure, and Lisa had stormed off with her kids and my mom had been looked at me angrily all evening, but no one had actually said anything to me after my declaration. I figured they were probably too embarrassed to admit I had a point, but that peace didn't last long. As soon as I came downstairs, I could feel the tension in the air. My mom was in the kitchen aggressively wiping down the counters, even though they were already clean, her go-to move when she was stressed about something. The usual morning Thanksgiving after chaos was their half-empty Tupperware containers of leftovers scattered on the counters, a mountain of dirty dishes in the sink, and the faint smell of turkey still lingering in the air. But it wasn't just the mess that felt off. My mom wasn't saying anything, but she didn't have to. I could feel it, something was brewing. It didn't take long for her to say what was on her mind. As I opened the fridge and grabbed a slice of leftover pie, I could hear the telltale signs of her irritation building up behind me. First came the dramatic sigh, the kind that was so loud and deliberate, it could have been heard across the house. It wasn't just a sigh, it was the sigh, the one she always used when she wanted to signal that she had something important to say, but was trying to decide how to phrase it in a way that wouldn't immediately spark a fight. I froze for a second, plate in hand, already knowing exactly what was coming. Still, I braced myself, hoping maybe I was wrong. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. Sure enough. Her tone was clipped and overly formal when she finally spoke, the words measured but sharp, like she was holding back her full frustration. She told me that Aunt Lisa had called her earlier that morning, and apparently Aunt Lisa was very upset about my behavior at dinner. The way she said very upset made it sound like Aunt Lisa had spent the entire night stewing over it, working herself into some kind of melodramatic frenzy before deciding to call my mom and unload her feelings. According to my mom, and Lisa had described my behavior as disrespectful and said she felt completely humiliated in front of the family because of the way I'd refused to help out. She even went so far as to say that my actions made her feel like a bad parent, as though I'd intentionally set out to shame her. I just stood there still holding my plate as my mom relayed all of this in that carefully neutral tone she uses when she's trying to appear impartial but is clearly leaning one way. It was obvious. She wasn't just a messenger. Her words were dripping with subtext, and I could tell she wasn't thrilled with me either, even if she hadn't outright said it yet. The irritation was there in the tightness of her jaw, the way she avoided looking directly at me, and the fact that she was suddenly wiping down the counter with way more force than necessary. She wasn't just annoyed about the situation, she was annoyed with me for being the cause of it. Disrespectful, embarrassed. The words rattled around in my head as I stood there. The warmth of the pie in my hand suddenly feeling like an afterthought. Was she serious? I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my pulse quickening as my emotions churned between anger and disbelief. And Lisa upset, and Lisa embarrassed. Was this the same Aunt Lisa who had been dropping her kids off at my feet every Thanksgiving for years, treating me like a live-in nanny without so much as a thank you? Was this the same person who had never once considered how I felt about being conscripted into babysitting duty while she sat in the kitchen, sipping wine and laughing with the other adults? Now she wanted to act like she was the victim because I'd finally said no. The audacity of it all was almost laughable, if it hadn't been so infuriating. I could feel my grip tightening on the plate as I forced myself to stay calm. I wanted to snap, to unload all of the frustration I've been bottling up for years, but I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. Instead, I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before I said anything. The last thing I needed was to let my mom think I was being overly emotional and dismiss my side of things as teenage drama. I knew I had to approach this calmly, rationally, even though everything in me was screaming to let loose. When I finally spoke, I started by reminding her of the most important fact, and Lisa's kids weren't my responsibility. Plain and simple. They were her children, not mine, and it was her job to take care of them, not mine. I wasn't their nanny, their babysitter, or their live-in childcare provider, and I certainly wasn't getting paid to deal with them. I pointed out how ridiculous it was that Lisa expected me to give up my entire Thanksgiving every year to watch her kids while she enjoyed herself without a second thought. It wasn't fair and it wasn't right. I was part of the family too, and I deserved to enjoy the holiday just as much as everyone else. I didn't stop there. I reminded my mom that even though I said I wasn't babysitting this year, I still ended up helping out more than I should have. I had spent part of the evening watching the kids while everyone else was setting up, making sure they didn't destroy the house or kill each other in the process. I cleaned up their messes, calmed them down when they started fighting, and kept them occupied while dinner was being prepared. I'd already done more than my fair share, even though I made it clear I wasn't going to take on that role anymore. If anything, and Lisa should have been thanking me for the time I did spend helping out, not complaining about the moment I finally stood up for myself. I could see my mom bristling as I taught. I knew she didn't like being put in the middle of a situation like this, especially not when it involved her sister. But I wasn't backing down. I explained how exhausting it was to be the default babysitter every single year, how it made me feel invisible, like my time didn't matter and my presence at the table wasn't important. I told her how draining it was to spend hours chasing after kids while everyone else got to relax, laugh, and enjoy the holiday. I reminded her as gently as I could, but I wasn't a little kid anymore. I was 16. I had my own life, my own responsibilities, and I deserved to have a Thanksgiving where I wasn't treated like an unpaid nanny. At first, my mom just stood there, staring at me like she wasn't sure how to respond. I could tell she was torn. On one hand, she wanted to defend Lisa family loyalty and all that. On the other hand, I think she knew I was right. After all, she'd seen firsthand how every Thanksgiving played out. She'd watched as I got stuck with the kids year after year, and deep down, she probably knew it wasn't fair. Eventually, she sighed again, softer this time, and sat down at the kitchen table. She told me she understood where I was coming from, but that I could have handled it better. I nodded, admitting that maybe my timing hadn't been the best. But I stood by what I said. I wasn't trying to embarrass Lisa, I was just standing up for myself. My mom seemed to take that in her expression, softening a little as she thought it over. She even admitted that Aunt Lisa had always relied on me a bit too much, and that it wasn't right to put so much on my shoulders. By the end of the conversation, she actually agreed with me. She said she'd talk to Aunt Lisa and make it clear that I wasn't the family babysitter anymore. If someone needed to watch the kids, it would be up to the parents to figure it out, not me. She even apologized for not stepping in sooner, which was more than I'd expected. I could tell she still felt bad about the whole situation, but at least she was on my side now. It felt like a small victory, even if I knew Aunt Lisa wouldn't be happy about it. The rest of the day was pretty quiet. My mom spent most of the cleaning up and organizing leftovers, and I stayed out of her way, relieved that the drama was finally over. I knew the next family gathering might be a little awkward, and Lisa wasn't the type to let things go easily, but for now, I was just glad I'd stood up for myself.